everybody. It is Dean Z speaking to you from Jeffries Hall at the University of Michigan Law School. I want to talk about personal statements today, which we've talked about already once this season, and I have a couple questions that I want to address. But I also want to say personal statements are the thing. Like, this is the thing about which I get the most questions repeatedly, and I think it is the area of the application that you should really be thinking about and working on. It is the thing over which you have the most control. So, I think you should be thinking about it in a very optimistic and confident way, because it's like, this is your chance to take over this whole application process that often feels like it's about the numbers or it's outside your control and things in your past that have already happened. Well, this is the future, right? And so you got this. So let's talk. All of that is to say, if you have questions, specific questions, broad questions, whatever it is about your personal statements, I'd really love to see them. So please keep those cards and letters coming. Okay. So I want to start with two questions that are a very nice bookend to each other. One says, I have a story when I was a little girl that's a little personal, but it's my reason for wanting to be an attorney. Can I talk about that? And the other one was, what should not be written in our personal statements? And so that nicely encapsulates exactly, I think, what everyone who is sitting around trying to draft one of these is thinking about. What should I say and what should I avoid saying? So first of all, to the first question, who says there's a story when I was a little girl and it's a little personal. It is a personal statement, right? So that is my overarching advice to you, is it has to be about you. That doesn't answer questions about specifics and particular topics, but you should be thinking in terms of being personal. That's what makes it interesting. That's what sets you apart. We talk all the time about having it be your actual voice and having it be authentic and so on and so forth. And that's all to the point of it has to be something that is personal to you. I feel like I'm just saying the word personal 1,000 times in a row, and that isn't really shedding light on anything. But the point of that question of, is it too personal? No, right? The fact that it's personal is not a reason not to write it. A reason that the topic might not be good is because you said it's something that happened to you when you were a little girl. And in general, you shouldn't be focusing on things from childhood. There's exceptions to every rule, but I'm interested in knowing, who are you right now? Who is this person who is in front of me? So if you want to say, like, I was formed by this thing that happened in childhood, okay, but talk about where we are now. Don't focus on the childhood part. You might need to refer to it, you might need to lay it out there, but it shouldn't be the focus and the centerpiece of your personal statement. Keep it brief and then move on to why are we here today, okay? So that's number one. And then what should not be written about in our personal statements is, it's all the stuff that doesn't have any relevance. Like, things that happened in childhood are usually not particularly relevant to the law school journey. You want to focus on topics that are going to put you in a good light, right? Let's think about what our mission is here. You're trying to get into law school, so you're trying to focus on things that will help you appear professional, confident, positive, good future member of a community, hardworking, industrious, you name it. Like, there's a million different adjectives that could be positive factors for deciding that someone should be a lawyer. And so you want to think about what are those factors that those might be, which of those apply to you, and then work into what is the story or stories that you can tell that will help illustrate that about yourself. So don't put things in there just because they're fun, interesting stories don't get us to the point of why you would be a good lawyer and law student. Don't talk about stories that are, don't focus on stories rather that are sort of dramatic, just for the sake of drama. That's not relevant. Everything should be leading up to answering the question, why should I admit you? And I think if you just are always trying to keep that in the back of your mind. You're going to be well served. With regard to also this idea of dramatic stories, I want to say sometimes people tell a story that is, I suppose if all the details were in there, it would be maybe overwhelming for a reader, and distracting and even upsetting. And there are ways to, and there, that I don't want to say don't tell that story at all. Don't hear me saying that. But I do think you should be thinking in terms of oversharing and being worried about that or shying away from that. You don't, because the drama of it is not in and of itself what's significant. What is significant is how that developed you. So every story is fair game. It's really about the way you tell the story, is what I would say. And think about that, like that you're talking to someone who doesn't know you, and you wouldn't maybe tell them every single thing about yourself in the first conversation, and so have that sort of as a standard that you are applying. I feel like this might sound a little inconsistent. I'm saying be personal, but not too personal. But it is just a balance there, right? You want to get your message across without accidentally putting in information that isn't what you want to convey. And so you just got to think about what does the reader really need to know? Yeah, and a lot of this comes out also in tone, which I talk a lot about too. So you need to, once you figure out the topic of your writing and you start drafting it, you need to constantly be rereading it and think about, how am I coming off? How do I appear with this language that I am choosing and the details that I am conveying? Yeah. Thinking about tone is going to be very important. So that was uninspired. Sorry, Dustin. But, okay. So, and now I want to get into a couple questions that have a little more detail in them, that are a little more precise as opposed to the overarching stuff. But here's one that I love from someone who left a comment on an old application read that I did named King of Snow. And King of Snow writes, I have no opinion on Ayn Rand myself, but I have to wonder, do you expect people to grapple with the perspectives of detractors for every public figure they bring up in their personal statement, or just for those you disagree with politically? Great question. I'm so glad you asked that, because it's really not at all about whether I disagree with something politically. I will say there are people who I agree with politically who are way further out there than Ayn Rand, and I would say be very cautious about relying on them in your personal statement. But in particular, that app read, which, by the way, thank you for watching old episodes. That's great. But that app read, what I was saying was the person was extolling Ayn Rand as being the person that, their philosophy had inspired this person to go to law school. And, speaking about it very favorably. And my point there, first of all, they weren't just referring to Ayn Rand. They were saying, this is very important to me. This has shaped me. So, if you are giving someone credit for shaping you, you should be thinking about, how will people who don't know me think about that? And Ayn Rand is a controversial figure. So I guess I'm saying, if you're using a controversial figure as sort of saying this person is shaped by worldview, you should be cognizant of the fact that they are controversial and that you may get reactions from the readers. And if you're not explaining, if you're not sort of acknowledging the weaknesses or the detractions that person may, that individual may inspire in a reader, you're missing a trick, right? You're just not being a persuasive writer. It's really just a rhetorical undertaking that you think about, what are the weaknesses in my argument, and you address those first. So that's all I'm saying. And you are absolutely right that I should not, in any way be seen as saying this is all about Ayn Rand or people who are politically conservative. This is true regardless of particular political viewpoint. I would certainly say that if you nobody's going to even know who this is, but if Kate Millett is the person who is like most inspiring to you, you better recognize that not everybody who knows Kate Millett loves Kate Millett, and you might want to grapple with that. So now maybe you'll go look up Kate Millett and learn a little bit about me. Anyway, okay. Here's another one that it also gets to like what to talk about and what not to talk about that I think will be helpful for illuminating this point. It was an email. It was so this is just an excerpt from the email, which is a little long. I'm a little over 2 years sober now, and the journey has made a profound impact on my life. I can see my life's purpose clearer than ever, and I know nothing can stop me now. I feel like I am just now truly breaking through my generational curses, and I don't want to stop. I want to break the systems that cause the curses. I'd love to talk about it in my essay, but I am worried about the perception and stigma. My gut tells me to leave the addiction arc out. I know I have enough personal journey even without it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. This is a great question. So the reason to leave out an addiction arc or any other similar kind of tale isn't, I don't think, because of the stigma, although again, the fact that you recognize that there may be some stigma there, I think is an inoculation of it, which is you can write it in such a way that you think about it from the point of view of someone who thinks, ooh, addicts, very bad, right? Make sure you're addressing those kinds of biases when you're writing it and sort of, getting rid of them, if you will. But it is because any story, you have to be, again, thinking you want to portray yourself positively. So is the addiction arc story for this applicant the thing that is going to portray them most positively? It might be, because I honestly think coming through addiction is, this person clearly has a ton of passion and has a lot of clarity about what they want to do with their life. And I think that only happened because, it sounds like, because of the experiences they had with addiction. But sometimes people are just like, I went through this suffering and now I'm on the other side of it. You really have to tell that story of how this positively shaped you. You can't just say like, here are some terrible things that happened when I was an addict, but now I worked really hard and now I'm sober and I'm ready to go. You've got to flesh that out. Like, why should I care about this journey that you were on, and why has it made you a better person? Why has it made you more ready? So there's often advice that you get in this context where people will say, don't write about something negative that happened to you. And addiction is certainly a negative thing. I would modify that and say, like, make sure that it is, being, that the conclusion someone reading it will draw is it ended in a very positive way for this person. It led to a very positive development. So it's not, don't tell negative stories. It's like, tell me why this has made you better. Okay, another one. I have a burning question about writing a personal statement. Is it informal and unprofessional to include dialogues in a personal statement? I would like to keep the dialogues in my personal statement if possible. And then they attach their personal statement draft. And by dialogues, what they meant was sort of a back and forth, like a conversation that they were having with someone. And it's not terrible. But the fact of the matter is, you're putting something in quotes that is almost certainly not an actual quote. Like you almost certainly do not have a transcript of the actual dialogue. So you're making it, and this isn't fiction, right? This is an essay. And so I always think it's funny when people write a memoir and then it turns out that some of the parts of the memoir are inaccurate and people get very exercised about that. And I think, of course, there's parts of it that's not accurate. Who the hell remembers their life perfectly from, when they were childhood and beyond? So it's like, the thing I don't like about it is this false precision. You are acting like this is something that you are sure happened, this is the conversation that happened, and it's not. And so you're necessarily fictionalizing it, and you shouldn't be doing that in a personal statement. So I think you're better off summarizing the conversation or explaining the nature of the conversation as opposed to having a sort of back and forth between you and someone else. It just always sounds it just makes me suspect, right? Like you're trying to portray something as being that definitely happened, and I suspect it probably didn't definitely happen. So think about that. Remember, you're portraying yourself positively, but it all has to be true. So make sure you're staying far away from fiction when you're writing this. Okay, and then we already talked about tone too, which was going to be my end point, but I put it in the middle instead. So be thinking about tone and making sure you're coming off in the way you want to be perceived. All right, now it is time for grammar. There are two words that are very similar that I always have to stop and think, wait, which is the one I mean when I want to use these? And the other day it came up, and I wrote it down on a little slip of paper so I could use it for grammar. And then I had this little file folder where I keep ideas for, A to Z. And I opened that file folder this morning and found another slip of paper that I'd written, God knows when, like years ago, with the same two words on there. So it really seems like I should be sharing this bit of advice. The words are continuous and continual. Continuous means it is uninterrupted. It is just always happening. And continual means it is repeatedly recurring. So it might stop and start. So I should have thought of a good example before I started talking, but I didn't. But I am continuously, no, that's wrong. Let me try it this way. I am continually forgetting to think of good examples before I start talking, because it repeatedly recurs. I'm not doing it in every sentence. I don't know. But you know what? The important thing here is just remember that these are two different words, and you might want to double check them. There's no shame in that. Like, there are just so many things that I have hidden away in my brain of, like, remember that has a little asterisk next to it. You got to double check that and make sure you're using it right. And I feel like that is actually the whole point of all this grammar advice, is just trying to get in there the things that might be tricky, and then you can always go and use them. And eventually, if you do it enough, it will become second nature. I obviously don't say those words frequently enough for it to be second nature to me. But yeah, it's sort of, and it's also a good rule for being a lawyer. Every jurisdiction in the world has rules of civil procedure, rules of criminal procedure, and they're just like the rules of how to interact with the court. Lawyers should always read those before they get started practicing law. And you don't have to memorize. You will never memorize them. There's a million of them in there. But what will happen is, if you've read them through once, the fact that there are answers in there and the type of things that are addressed will always be in your brain. And that, I think, is the real trick. Okay, I hope that was useful. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And send us your questions. You can send us emails to law.jd.admissions@umich.edu or put them in the comments below. Thanks as always to my pal, Dustin. And wherever you go, go blue.